You realize some truths too late to undo the harm, but just in time to stop repeating it. I learned mine standing in a hotel ballroom in Seattle, wearing a uniform my family had spent 8 years pretending didn't exist. My name is Alexander Brennan. I'm 34 now. The morning of my sister's wedding, my mother handed me a cream-colored dress still wrapped in boutique tissue and asked, gently, carefully, if I might consider leaving my service dress at the hotel. The Harringtons are traditional, she said, smoothing the fabric. It might feel out of place. She didn't say you'll feel out of place, she didn't have to. I had flown in from North Carolina the night before. I'd ironed my uniform out of muscle memory, and I'd told myself, like I always did, that this visit would be different. It wasn't. What happened when I finally stopped making myself small is not a revenge story, it's a reckoning, and it started long before that weekend. I grew up in a house that valued appearances over almost everything else. My mother, Caroline, came from a background she rarely talked about but constantly ran from. Her father had been Army, enlisted, not officer, and he'd come back from Desert Storm with injuries that ended his career and started his drinking. She grew up in base housing and thrift store clothes, and by the time she was 16, she'd made herself a promise, her children would never know that life. So she married a man with a steady income and good credit. She joined the right committees, she made sure we had the right friends, the right teachers, the right everything. My younger sister, Natalie, fit that vision beautifully. I did not. I enlisted in the Army at 19, right out of a state school I hated. I told my parents it was temporary, just a way to pay for a graduate degree later. My mother repeated that line to everyone who asked, even after I went to OCS, even after I made captain, even after I deployed twice. She's figuring things out, she'd say at barbecues, smiling tightly. It's a phase. It stopped being a phase somewhere outside Kandahar on a supply route that turned into something else entirely, but my mother never asked about that, so she never had to know. Here's what I need you to understand about being invisible in your own family. It doesn't happen all at once. It's a series of small erasures, a conversation redirected, a question never asked, a moment of pride swallowed before it can be spoken. When I made captain, my mother sent a congratulations card, late, generic, the kind you grab at a drugstore. When Natalie got promoted to associate at her marketing firm, my mother threw a dinner party. I noticed. I didn't say anything. That was my role, notice, absorb, stay quiet. I got very good at it. The wedding invitation came 4 months in advance, printed on heavy cardstock with Natalie's fiancé's family crest embossed at the top. James Harrington III, Old Seattle Money, a portfolio manager with a corner office and a last name that opened doors. My mother was euphoric. This is everything, she told me on the phone, breathless. The Harringtons are, Alex, they're connected. This changes things for all of us. I said I was happy for Natalie, I meant it. I booked my flight, I requested leave, I packed my dress uniform because that's what you wear to formal family events. It didn't occur to me that it would be a problem. Not until 3 days before the wedding, when my mother called again. I was thinking, she started, in that careful voice she used when she wanted something. Maybe you could wear something a little softer? The Harringtons are, well, they're very refined. A uniform might feel heavy. Heavy. That was the word she chose. I told her I'd think about it. I didn't sleep much that night. There was one person in my unit who would have understood exactly what I was feeling. Her name was Sergeant Lila Ortiz, and she died on my second deployment doing something I should have done instead. I carry a photo of her in my wallet, 22 years old, bright smile. She used to hum while she cleaned her rifle. The day before everything went wrong, she told me she was going to open a bakery when she got home, somewhere small, somewhere her mom could work the register. She gave me a challenge coin that afternoon, stamped with our unit insignia. For luck, ma'am, she said, grinning, you're gonna need it more than me. I still have it, she doesn't. That's the part of my life my family never asked about, the part my mother thought was too heavy for a wedding. I arrived in Seattle on a Thursday. Natalie picked me up from the airport, talking nonstop about seating charts and floral arrangements and the string quartet the Harringtons had flown in from Boston. She looked happy, nervous, but happy. I was glad for her. The rehearsal dinner was that night at the Harrington estate, a sprawling Victorian in Queen and with a view of the Sound. There were maybe 40 people there, all of them polished and confident in that specific way wealth allows. I wore a simple dress. I stayed quiet. I watched my mother work the room, laughing a little too loud, touching people's arms, performing. She introduced Natalie to everyone. She barely introduced me at all. At one point, someone asked what I did, and my mother answered before I could. Oh, Alex is in the service, she said lightly. She's taking some time to figure out her next step. I was a captain with 8 years in. I'd led a platoon through 2 deployments. I had commendations I didn't talk about because no one ever asked. But in that room, I was just someone figuring things out. I excused myself and found the bathroom. I looked at myself in the mirror for a long time. I almost wore the dress. I need you to know that. The morning of the wedding, I stood in my hotel room with two choices laid out on the bed, my mother's cream dress and my army service uniform. The dress was beautiful, elegant, anonymous. The uniform was navy blue with a skirt, brass buttons, a row of ribbons over the left breast pocket. One of those ribbons had a small bronze star in the center. I picked up the uniform jacket. My hands were shaking. There's a thing that happens when you've spent years making yourself smaller, you start to believe that's your actual size. I believed it, right up until I didn't. I thought about Lila, I thought about the road, I thought about the citation that came 6 months later, the one my parents received and never mentioned. I put on the uniform. I didn't do it to make a statement, I did it because I was tired of pretending the most important part of my life didn't exist. The ceremony was in a historic chapel downtown. I sat in the back and cried when Natalie came down the aisle because she looked so much like the kid I used to read bedtime stories to. Afterward, everyone moved to the reception venue, a grand ballroom in a private club the Harringtons had belonged to for 3 generations. I waited until most of the guests had arrived, then I walked in. I wasn't trying to make an entrance, I was just trying to find my table. But the room noticed. Conversations slowed, heads turned, I kept my eyes forward and my posture straight, the way you're trained to move when people are watching. I found my seat, table 12, near the back corner, as far from the head table as the room allowed. I was halfway there when I heard a chair scrape. Then another. Then a voice, low and clear, from somewhere near the front. Bronze star in the room. I stopped. An older man, 70, maybe older, was standing near the head table, trim, gray-haired, wearing a tuxedo and a look I recognized instantly. He was looking directly at the ribbon on my chest. And then, slowly, he brought his hand up in a salute. I felt something crack open inside me. I came to attention, I returned the salute, crisp and clean, the way Lila would have wanted. The room went completely silent. And then, one by one, others stood. A woman in her 60s by the windows, a younger man near the bar, an older gentleman with a cane by the door. 7 people total, all veterans, all standing. Not for me, for what the uniform represented. For people like Lila, whose names they'd never know. My mother's face, when I finally looked at her, was white. She was frozen in the center of the room, surrounded by the Harringtons and their guests, watching the moment she'd tried so hard to prevent unfold exactly as she'd feared. Except it wasn't going the way she thought. Because James Harrington's father, tall, silver-haired, composed, crossed the room and stopped in front of me. He didn't look embarrassed, he looked moved. "Captain Brennan," he said quietly, offering his hand, "it's an honor." Then he turned to the room. "My father served in Korea," he said. "He came home and built this family on one principle, that we never forget what people like the captain pay so that the rest of us get to stand in rooms like this." He gestured toward a plaque on the wall I hadn't noticed, a memorial scholarship fund in his father's name. Half the people standing, he explained, were there because the Harringtons had spent decades supporting veteran causes and honoring service members. The very family my mother had been desperate to impress was the one family on earth most likely to understand exactly what I was. She'd read the room perfectly backward. My mother tried to recover. She came toward me, hands outstretched, voice bright. "We're so proud," she said, loud enough for everyone. "We've always been so proud of our Alex." But her voice was too high, her smile too wide. A few people who didn't know better smiled back, relieved. I just looked at her. "Mom," I said quietly, "don't." Her face crumpled, just for a second, then she caught herself, rebuilt the mask, and walked away. My father found me later, near the coat check. He was holding an envelope, creased and soft, like it had been opened many times. "They sent this," he said, "after your second deployment, the citation." I read it. I should have said something. I looked at the envelope, at my father, at the 8 years of silence sitting between us. "Yeah," I said, "you should have." He nodded. He didn't argue. It wasn't forgiveness, but it was something. Natalie found me before I left. She hugged me hard, her face against my shoulder. "I didn't know," she whispered. "I never asked, and I should have. I'm sorry." I believed her. Here's what I learned. The people worth impressing already understood. And the ones who needed me to hide were protecting themselves, not me. I don't talk to my mother much anymore, not because I'm angry, just because I'm done shrinking. Natalie calls every week. My father sends emails, careful and earnest, Trying. It's not perfect, but it's honest. And honest, I've learned, is the only kind of family worth keeping. If someone ever asked you to make yourself smaller to keep the peace, this is your sign to stop. You are not too much. You were never too much. You were just in a room that was too small.